Hi, Chris. Welcome to Happy Thursday.
Stephanie, how are you? It is great to see you. You're looking wonderful, as always, on this Thursday morning.
Thanks. I like your hair today.
Thank you. I did it special for you.
You know, men should pay attention to how they are dressing, especially as they're commuting into work, because what's the difference between a poorly dressed man on a tricycle and a well-dressed man on a bicycle?
I don't know, Stephanie. What is the difference between a poorly dressed man on a tricycle and a well-dressed man on a bicycle?
Attire.
Oh, God. I hate that I found that so funny.
Listen, our small minds early in the morning. You're gonna do what you can, right?
Look, Stephanie, I got to open up about something. My
Okay.
wife, she's trying this new makeup routine, this new thing, and she's drying her eyebrows, like she's coloring her eyebrows, but she's putting it really high on her face. When I said, honey, I think you're putting your eyebrows too high on your forehead, she looked surprised. Oh,
Okay.
God. I'm just looking to see if Steve's still here after hearing.
Yeah, he's our guest is probably like, you know what? What did I sign up for?
Right, exactly. This is usually when people bail out, Steve. They
Yeah. We do have a very interesting topic today. We've got a great topic, actually one that I've been looking forward to talking about. So what if your support costs are hiding your biggest competitive advantage? Pret-a-Manger gives every employee discretion to comp any item, anytime, no approval required. Their service recovery costs run higher than other competitors, but their customer lifetime value outpaces the category by margins they don't disclose. Today on How to Founder, we're going to be talking about customer service as business architecture, as a competitive advantage. I'm your host, Stephanie Hayes. With me is my wonderful co-host. What's your name again? Oh, Chris Franks. And we have a special guest today. Steve Anderson wrote the Bezos letters after dissecting 21 shareholder letters to decode how Amazon turned customer obsession into operational advantage. He spent 4 decades advising on risk strategy and now helps founders treat service as infrastructure. Steve, welcome. You're still here.
I am still here. I laughed along, and I'm not going to even attempt to, have my own entry into this that part of the conversation.
I'm sure that you have,
because it keeps your IQ higher than the two of us. It immediately, we're like, yeah, you're just smarter. Yeah, for sure.
Hey, Steve, so most founders treat customer service as a cost to minimize rather than in infrastructure to invest in. So what's the actual business cost, or where's the actual opportunity of investing in your service infrastructure?
So every business knows they need to take care of customers. Let's just get that baseline.
Wait,
the question is
what? Hold on, I need to write this down. I need to do what? I need to
take care of your customers.
All right, see, that's probably why my business is suck. All right.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, makes Amazon different and allowed it to grow to where it is today is Bezos' obsession with customers. So, as you said, Stephanie, I analyzed the shareholder letters, read them through, realized there were threads going through those letters. Now, most shareholder letters are boring, right? Touting the company and how great the CEO is and all of that. Bezos did a little bit of that. But really what caught my attention is he talked about how he did it. And I'm going to reference that very first letter in 1997. They went public in 97. Shareholder letter came out in the spring of 98, kind of standard. And there were several sections in that letter. One of those sections was that we will obsess over customers. Now think about that, because we talk about customer service, customer journey, customer focus, but we don't typically talk about obsessing over customers. And so that became a cultural, what's the right word? Principle in Amazon. So what does obsession mean? Well, actually, to me, that word is so interesting because it has negative connotations, right? You can think about somebody being so obsessed over that it's not necessarily thought of a positive thing. But when you're dealing with customers, it focuses. And so let me give you a couple of examples. I'll do one example, and then we can see how much time we have. Amazon Marketplace. So that was early 2000s. Amazon opened up their website sales pages to third-party merchants. Now, there's a long history about how they got there, but who in their right mind opens up their prime real estate to their competitors? But here's what Bezos said. If a third-party seller has a product that we don't have in inventory, that's better for the customer. If they have a price that's better than we can get, that's better for the customer. And if it's better for the customer, it'll ultimately be better for Amazon and our shareholders. And that's the idea of customer obsession, having that filter through what's best for the customer. That obsession also goes to, I think, one of the keys to how Amazon has grown, which is we invent on behalf of the customer. And so always having the customer in mind when you're looking at products, platforms, services, what's next, what can we invent on behalf of the customer before they even know they want it or need it?
So I think this goes beyond like motherhood and apple pie, just being good, custodians of your customers. There's actually, so Patrick Lencioni wrote Getting Naked, right? And it's all about just that obsession with your customers. Oh, somebody's got a train going by.
I just for a second I thought that was in my head.
I was like, oh, here we go. There it is again.
Right.
So Patrick Lencioni's book talks about how CEOs had learned just how, through data, just how important it can be that the repair that you do when there's a problem is actually more impactful on the brand of your business than, always giving good customer service. And so he tells the story of, a CEO actually started to experiment with purposely doing things wrong. So they had the opportunity to give amazing customer service to folks who were writing in because they'd had some problem. And he's got all sorts of other stories in there. So like there's actual transactional value in becoming amazing at the services that you provide to your customers. So can you talk a little bit about that?
One of the things Bezos said is customer service is a failure. Because the reason somebody comes to you for help is something went wrong. And how can we fix their problem? But more importantly, and again, Stephanie, you just alluded to it, how can we fix the systemic problem that caused that customer's problem? And so he was focused on not just taking care of the customer, but fixing whatever process was in place that caused the problem in the first place. And so one of the focuses of Amazon throughout the years that they've been doing this is actually automating problem solutions, meaning having systems in place that actually monitor so that somebody is notified when a problem occurs and can take proactive action. Here's one example, and a reporter. This happened to a reporter. He was doing an article on the business principles of Casablanca, and so he had rented on Amazon Prime Casablanca and was fast forwarding and backing up, and he got an email from Amazon that said, "Hey, we noticed you were having trouble watching Casablanca, so we've already refunded the amount you paid for that movie at that time." That's what it was. And he wrote an article about it saying, they noticed I had a problem, and they automatic. I didn't have to ask for the help. I didn't have to ask for a refund because I couldn't watch the movie. That's the ultimate customer service. And every company should be striving for not having a customer service department because everything works so smoothly. Now, that's a little crazy, I admit. And if you look at Amazon, one of the things they're really good at is making returns as easy as possible. It's a hassle, but as easy as possible, right? Even just recently, I was at a Whole Foods, right? And the return little kiosk, you scan it, you have your little barcode that you got, you submitted it, drop it, and literally before you get back to your car, you get a notice that the money's been refunded to your account. So all those little things are at the core of obsessing over customers.
So I want to push this even a little bit further, and to the concept of service actually being a sales function. And I know, Chris, you and I have had a conversation about this before, and I know that some of your previous roles, you have been in a business, or you've owned a business where that really mattered. So can you talk a little bit about your own perspective on the idea of customer service actually being a sales role?
I think the thing that's super interesting, Steve, is, and I think that this goes directly to what you're saying with what they did at Amazon, is that we tend to approach this idea of service as very bespoke. So if you think about the idea of like Zappos in our generation, Stephanie, before that Nordstrom's, this idea that any individual will go above and beyond. And to answer your question directly, I think I tried to do this, Stephanie. I'm not sure that I did that good of a job. But Steve, the approach from Amazon is not about the bespoke individual one-on-one, because I think Bezos was so obsessed with scale and what he could achieve at Amazon that it became a product feature and a sales feature, Stephanie. I think it became this thing that was just so baked in to the actual product itself. I mean, is that a fair way to look at it, Steve?
I believe it is. And what ran through my mind as you were saying that is, why do you buy on Amazon? Simple question.
Because I can get my stuff fast.
Yeah, it's easier and faster. Share
it's
a
easier,
credit card.
faster.
Right.
I mean, I've kind of over the years, my wife and I will go, I need this. I'm just going to go to the store. Well, one, I don't know if the store has it. Could be big box, store, whatever. I don't know if they're going to have what I need. I could go on Amazon and find what I need exactly. They've got the inventory. And now, again, this is developed over many years. Now I can get it within hours, or certainly next morning, or certainly next day. The 2 days isn't fast enough anymore because of how Amazon has built their logistics network. Now, back to the marketplace idea of opening up your platform to third-party sellers, they charge for that, right? So they've actually enabled small business owners to not have to worry about warehousing, to not have to worry about inventory, to not have to worry about delivery, and they pay Amazon to do that for them. So for them, the obsession over customers has also created other business lines and other revenue sources because of how focused they are on that.
So if we can,
and let me just finish the thought, if I may.
yeah,
That keeps customers coming back. So one of my principles is understand your flywheel. Jim Collins, his book, Good to Great, classic, probably on many people's shelves right now. Go to chapter 8, where he describes the flywheel and the doom loop. And that book came out in the fall of 2001. Bezos invited him to a senior leadership team offsite meeting where they spent one whole day talking about Amazon's flywheel. So, Stephanie, back to your question of, does this build the business? And it does, because Amazon's flywheel at the middle of its growth, all those inputs, right? The easier it is to buy online, the more customers talk to others about it, word of mouth, and the more customers that come. The more customers that come gives them more leverage with manufacturers and product to be able to get better pricing. The better pricing brings more customers. The speed, all of that moves that flywheel, so that growth piece of it in the middle. So they all work together to ultimately increase revenue. And certainly, people are curious, how did Amazon do it? And there are some very specific things that Bezos incorporated and mindsets at Amazon that make that happen.
So I'd love to dig into those for a second, but I want to also just take this from the lens of like an Amazon down to, our listeners are founders, right? They're still in growth phase. They're still running relatively small businesses. So what can we take from the Amazon experience that can practically be applied with smaller businesses or earlier stage businesses? Like, what would you do at that early stage when you don't have the benefit of scale and you don't have the, quite the reach that an Amazon and resources that an Amazon might?
So the first thing I would remind everybody listening is Jeff Bezos started on his hands and knees in his garage in a house in Bellevue, Washington, just like everyone else. He had a vision, he had an idea, he had a long-term vision, and he took the steps necessary. So Amazon didn't start out at $1 trillion company. They started out with this crazy idea in the mid 90s that the internet would be a place where people could buy things. They started with books because that was an easier place to start. Right? One book is exactly the same as another. What distinguished Amazon from bookstores is Amazon could carry every book published. A bookstore, even the big box stores, carry a maximum 150,000 in inventory. So if you didn't have the book, you had to order it. People didn't know that, 2-week delivery was fine. They could get the book that they needed. His vision never was to stop there. And I think that's one thing for startups, certainly. What is your long-term vision? And do you have one? And then how are you going to execute doing that? So the other principle, and it's actually the very first principle, is encourage successful failure. So kind of back to your question, how can small business founders right now do something? What can help them? Bezos said, if you're going to invent on behalf of the customer, you have to experiment. If you're going to experiment, you're going to fail. So you have to build in a culture of what I call successful failure. Meaning, if you try something and it doesn't work, then why didn't it work and what can you learn from that? Now, I also want to say Amazon has always had an intolerance for incompetence. So this is not just who cares, let's throw it against the wall and see what happens. This is strategic, this is thoughtful, this is planned, and you can do this at any stage of business growth. It is one of the key reasons Amazon did grow to what they are today.
Okay. Chris, reflect on what you're hearing in terms of smaller businesses, founders, like what, you're in this stage right now. What do you take out of this that you would want to apply to the business that you're growing right now?
I think that there's been three things that I've really focused on from what you said, Steve. And I do think that it's a lot of the stuff that the dogma that we grew up with, Stephanie, which is the lean startup, Eric Ries, fail fast, all that sort of stuff. That focus of getting out of the building, finding answers, even as we think about, Three Steps to Epiphany, all those early books that talked about customer development. I don't know that there's ever been another business that scaled the way that Amazon has, that baked that into the culture more. And I also think that concept of failure, learning, one of the pieces that came out of the lean startup movement was this idea that startups are learning organizations. And failure doesn't matter, learning does. Failure without learning, that's real failure. But if you make a mistake, if you learn something critical about your business, about your customers, that could be an incredibly positive thing. I don't know. I mean, you could look at Meta on the other side as far as how they bake stuff into their constantly multivariate testing. But I think that there's a tension there of saying we want to build a great business, want to build a scalable business, but we want to do it in a way where we're continuing to learn and experiment and innovate. And Steve, I think that really is one of the things that is most innovative about Amazon, is that it becomes structurally so hard to do that in big companies. Mm-hmm. It's a huge company now. It's a colossally huge company. There becomes a disincentive in big companies to innovate and to test and to fail. But somehow they've managed to continue. I think they've managed to continue that culture. I mean, does it still exist today? Is that even as
Yes.
Bezos stepped away? I know he's coming back in. But.
Yes, that does still exist today. And again, you're right. It's a core part of the culture. And one of the problems with scaling is keeping that culture. Here's what I'll say about failure. I don't believe employees are afraid of failure. I believe employees are afraid of the consequences of failure. And if, as a founder, you punish for failure, you're not going to get more experiments. And again, what Bezos said is, if you're going to experiment and you're not going to fail, it's not an experiment. But how do we, again, I come from the risk management insurance background. How do we mitigate that risk? One of the tools they used early on and developed over the years is called a 6-page memo. So you talk about tools. So in 2004, Bezos sent an email around to the senior leadership team that said, we will no longer allow slide-oriented presentations in any meeting. In its place, the team requesting the meeting and a decision, new product, new service, whatever it was, is required to physically write a 6-page memo detailing the first page, a press release that will be released on the day this product is released to the public. And then FAQs. What are all the questions? What are the answers we've been able to determine? What answers don't we have right now? And that memo is not sent out before the meeting. It's physically handed out at the meeting. Because what Bezos said was, executives are busy. They say they're going to read it. They won't. So we're going to carve out time at every meeting and pass that memo out and have study hall for the first 15, 20, 30, whatever it takes, minutes. And then we'll open up for discussion. Now, let's say that project is approved and down the road, it doesn't work out. All of a sudden now I have a document to go back to say, what did we think we knew? We didn't. What did we assume was right that wasn't? And we can do an after-action review. So we have a mechanism now automatically in place to learn from the mistakes so we don't make them again. And I think part of all of the things you mentioned, Chris, was the tool to actually make that happen. Not just fail fast, but fail fast and learn from it, and the mechanism to learn from it, and the mechanism to reduce the risk of failure. So we don't go off with this idea, and 6 months later go down and we've developed all stuff and realize it's not going to do what we thought it was going to do. Let's figure that out as soon as possible, and actually I mean, look at Amazon. I've actually documented over 60 major failures at Amazon. People don't talk about that because their successes are what people look at. But they just closed all their Amazon Go stores and Amazon Fresh stores. That doesn't mean they're not still focusing on grocery, but those didn't work the way they thought they should. So they're gone. They close them. That's the mindset that keeps, and I would say I do have a bit of a different take. I think the focus on innovation is wrong. The focus for businesses need to be on invention. And I go back to Clay Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma, right? You can innovate yourself to bankruptcy. And somebody else is going to invent something that'll leapfrog you because you're doing incremental improvement. That doesn't mean you don't do incremental. Kindle is incrementally improved. But what's the next Kindle? What's the next Prime Video? What's the next? What are you going to invent on behalf of the customer?
I love that. And, you know, I come from an innovation background, so we could nerd out on this forever, but let's come back to the idea of service. So I know, Steve, you've created like a framework around this and, you know, 14 steps, what have you. When does a founder, what's the trigger for a founder to know that they need to start paying attention to their service infrastructure? Like, is there a piece of data? Are there, you know, catalysts for them to watch for where they can recognize that investing in their service infrastructure is actually going to help them perhaps even more than investing in customer acquisition or something like that?
Yes, that's really interesting. And I deal with a lot of small businesses. And what the thought that comes to mind, really a couple things. One is, I think most small business owners don't actually understand their customer journey. So where is the friction a customer experiences? Do you even know? And, you know, I don't think you probably do. Find out, you know, and, you know, use a secret shopper idea. Somebody who doesn't know the business, ask a neighbor, ask, you know, a friend to call up and you know, or order something on the website that you're selling and find out where are the stopping points, where are the frustration points, where those are easy first places to start fixing the customer experience. Because if you fix it at the originating point, then you're not going to have as much customer service problems later. The other thought that triggered when you said that, Stephanie, is, and we know this, it's talked about so often, it costs X times more to acquire a new customer than to keep an existing customer. Mm-hmm. But we don't spend the time, resources, money, thoughts on figuring out why customers leave and what's wrong. And one of the things that, you know, like everybody, I think I'm playing around with AI a lot, and I'm working on a churn detector. What are the things that a business has data already that will predict when a customer is going to leave? And then what proactive steps can you take to engage with that customer, help them understand, hey, you're not using these parts of the platform or whatever it is, so you prevent a customer from leaving. That's, in my view, almost more important than acquiring a new customer. Because if you have customers leaving as faster than you're acquiring them, you're toast.
Yeah. So how do we get that feedback loop? I mean, obviously that's when you think about sort of the revenue model inside of an organization, you know, we've got typically sales and marketing is over here, you know, doing their thing, and service is really considered to be a post-sales activity.
It's an expense.
Yeah. How do we
consider expense?
Right. So how do we like integrate those two and close that loop? I know, Chris, you've had some experience with this.
Well, one thing.
Go ahead.
If you want to go first, I will be quiet.
No, you go ahead, because I want to reflect it, because I think there's a really important lesson for founders here.
One of the things that comes to mind is, again, another process that Bezos put in place. And one of his letters, I don't remember, or pretty early on, he published his email address, jeff@amazon.com. And he said, email me when you have a problem. Because what he talked about was Amazon is hugely data driven. They track everything. And he said, anecdotal information often is more important to highlight. Are we actually tracking the right thing? Are we interpreting the right data? And if a customer says they have a problem, and early on, he looked at the emails, right? It didn't do that after a while. But the team would send him emails that customers really had a problem. And so he would forward that customer email to whoever was responsible for the team, the product, the service, with one character, a question mark. And it became a thing that you never wanted a question mark email from Jeff. Because what it said, what it meant, was you drop everything, you find out the core problem that caused this, certainly fix the customer, but fix the problem. Don't stop with fixing the customer. Continue to fix the problem so it doesn't happen again. And so he was really data-driven, and anecdotal information is really important to make sure you're actually measuring the right thing. And again, I go back to one of my principles, which is measure what matters, question what's measured, and trust your gut. And that's kind of the basis for that idea. So again, when we talk about customer service, are we fixing the problem currently and for the future? And that becomes the strategy of good. And again, there's this interesting, I already said, Bezos said, we shouldn't need customer service department. We should be able to fix it, not have the problem arise in the first place. Now, the reality is there's always going to be something. But how do we make that a strategic benefit, not a expense?
I think that the piece I just want to reflect on is I've been thinking a lot lately about early stage companies and companies' values. And it's not something, Stephanie, that we do that often. We don't sit down and really codify our values early stage. If we do, we talk about how we work internally, et cetera. But I was reflecting on Patagonia, incredible company. We all know what they stand for, and they're singularly focused on the value. One of the things I think that is really important lesson is starting to define who wins. And what I mean by that is in Patagonia, if there's a conflict between a product or maybe the revenue or the margin, whatever's the most environmentally friendly is always the tiebreaker. Mm-hmm. And the same thing, I think what Bezos did, and I think that he defined this, I've read most of his shareholder letters, Steve, is that he said again and again and again is that the customer wins our arguments. And so if it's about revenue, if it's about margin, the customer is going to win there. And I think it's something that it's easy for us to talk about. It's way harder to live and be consistent with when you start to feel those pressures, Stephanie, of like you have investors and they want to go fast, and they want to grow, and they have, it gets into governance and a whole lot of other issues. But I do think it's something where if a founding team, even early, sits down and defines who gets to win the argument, it can help, I believe. I know we got to get to the speed round, Stephanie, but just, I'd love your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I would just say if we can just sort of finish off with this kind of this last thought is if we actually look at our service architecture and our service delivery and we ask ourselves, how can this actually be a revenue driver? I think that's sort of the next step to really be thinking about how service kind of plays a role in the business. So great conversation. We definitely could talk for another half hour, but let's pop over to the speed round.
The Steve speed
the Steve round.
round.
The speed round, and put Steve on the spot. You ready, Steve? That little transition is a bit high anxiety. So if you need to do some breath work first, we can
took a deep breath while it was playing.
Okay, all right. So quick questions, gut reaction. If you don't like the question, we can actually just move past it. But let's do it. What percentage of your budget should go to service before product market fit?
I'm thinking 50-50. And with a goal of, again, reducing the need for service because you've architected, the problems away.
All right.
That create the service opportunity.
Awesome. Scripted responses or rep discretion for a 10-person startup?
Oh, 10-person rep discretion. They should be trained. They should have that relationship building. And they should have the authority to make decisions within whatever parameters make sense for that business.
All right. Phone support or chat only for a B2B SaaS?
Well, in today's world, chat should be AI, and phone should be a backup, and voice agents are coming. Again, there's lots of debate about whether that's good or bad, and it needs to be done well, bottom line. So I would say multi-channel, not just one or the other.
Okay. Offshore support team or a smaller domestic team at the same cost?
Based on some of my personal experience, smaller domestic.
Okay. Last question, refund immediately or investigate first when a customer claims you messed up?
Well, my first reaction is refund immediately and figure out later what happened and fix it. And I don't believe the customer is always right. So, there's a little bit of a tension there.
Yeah, totally. Great. And that's the point of these speed round questions is just, gut reaction, what comes up. There's no right or wrong answers unless Chris is answering. All right, let's go into we got some deep dive resources for you. The Service Profit Chain by James Heskett, Earl Sasser, and Leonard Schlesinger. It's too early to be saying hard words. Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh. Steve, great conversation. Where can people go to learn more about you?
Learn more about me. LinkedIn's my primary platform, so you can search Steve Anderson Insurance or Steve Anderson Bezos. You should find that. Connect with me. Let me know you listened. I'll be glad to connect with you. For the book, thebezosletters.com is the book website. Some resources there for you, and it's available on Amazon.
Amazing. All right. Chris, do you want to close us out?
I just wanted to say, if you do get on Amazon, there's a great gift idea. You can get a broken drum. You just can't beat it.
You can't
I know. Two dad jokes. There's probably one too many dad jokes.
Now you're in a deficit for our next round.
Yeah, I'm going to be cut off. I can't do that. Hey, genuinely appreciate everybody for listening. We are incredibly grateful for being here along your journey as you're creating value. We like to say you guys are the pioneers of economic prosperity, and we're just grateful to be here along the way. If you like us, if you like Steve, give us a like, give us a comment, maybe a little YouTube love, like, subscribe, all that sort of stuff. And we will see you again next week, where we'll have, I think, 27 episodes next week.
27 episodes in 1 week, yeah.
Maybe 2 or 3 episodes.
All right, thanks, guys. get